Good evening, and welcome to Nox Historia. Tonight, we travel to medieval England. Wherever you are, and however your day has been, you can set it all down now. There is nothing left to do tonight. Nothing to fix, nothing to finish. Just let yourself grow heavy. Let your breathing slow, and come with me, gently, in no hurry at all, to a small English town on a cool autumn evening some 700 years ago. We are going to the Middle Ages, though no one alive in this town has ever called it that, of course. To them, this is simply the world, and the present moment as ordinary and as real as your own. And it is a far gentler, far more ordinary world than you might imagine. Tonight, you will see no knights and no battles and no kings. Only a quiet country town, and the people in it settling down, as people always have, to sleep. You do not need to remember any of this. You do not need to follow closely or picture every detail. Just let the words drift past you, like the sound of a far-off bell across the fields at dusk. And if, somewhere along the way, you happen to fall asleep, good. That is exactly what this is for. It is the very end of the day. The autumn sun has gone down behind the church tower, and the sky above the rooftops has faded from gold to rose to a deep and dusty violet. The air is growing cool and still, and smells of wood smoke and turned earth and the last of the year's apples. The harvest is in. The hard work of the year is mostly done. And the little town is breathing out, slowly, into the quiet of the evening. It is a small place. Most medieval towns were. A few hundred souls, perhaps 1,000 or two, for in all of England in these years, only London was truly large. Here there is one good street of timber-framed houses, their upper floors jutting out over the road below on great oak beams, leaning toward their neighbors overhead. There is a market square and a stone church and a huddle of workshops and gardens, all wrapped within an earthen bank or a low wall, with gates that will soon be shut for the night. Beyond them lie the open fields and the woods and the dark. Listen now. There it is, the sound that ends every day in this town. A single great bell, tolling slow and deep from the church tower, out over the rooftops and the fields. This is the curfew bell. And here's a thing worth knowing as you lie there in the quiet. Our word, curfew, comes, almost unchanged, from the old French words couvre-feu, which mean, quite simply, cover the fire. For in a town built almost entirely of timber and thatch, a single stray ember in the night could destroy everything. And so, at the sound of the bell, most often around 8 o'clock in the evening, every household was to bank down its hearth fire for the night, to rake the glowing coals together and cover them over with ash so that no flame could escape in the dark. And so that, in the morning, a few embers would still be alive to wake the fire again. The curfew was not a rule about staying indoors, as we use the word now. It was, at heart, a gentle nightly act of care. Cover the fire. Make the house safe. Let the day end. That bell, and the others like it, were how this whole town knew the time at all. For there were almost no clocks in this world. Not yet. The townsfolk told the hours by the ringing of the church bells, which carried to every corner of so small a place, and by the slow wheel of the stars, and by the light. And their hours were not quite our hours either. They divided the daylight into 12, and the night into 12, whatever the season, so that an hour of daylight in high summer was a long, generous thing, and an hour of a winter's night much the same, while their opposites shrank short. Time itself breathed in and out with the turning year. The very first mechanical clocks were only just beginning to appear in these very years in a few great churches, and the earliest of them had no face and no hands at all. They were built only to strike a bell, to call the monks to prayer. We carry the quiet echoes of all this with us still. When we say a thing happens at 6 o'clock, we are saying, without knowing it, 6 of the clock. And our word noon once meant not midday at all, but the 9th hour of the day, nearer to 3 in the afternoon, before, slowly, over long years, it drifted back to the middle of the day where we keep it now. If your eyes have already begun to close, let them. You can stop listening whenever you like. I will keep walking, slowly, through these darkening streets, and you can come with me as far as you wish to go. In the market square, the last of the day's trading is long over. By day, this is the beating heart of the town, the stalls and the calling of prices, the farmers in from the villages with eggs and cheese and grain, the smell of fresh bread, the geese and the gossip. But now the stalls are bare boards and the square is empty, and the cobbles hold the last gray light. A cat crosses, unhurried, and vanishes into a doorway. And the great church, which has stood over this square for longer than anyone can remember, settles into its evening shadow. Let us turn down a side lane where one low window still glows warm and yellow in the dusk. This is the alehouse, though it has no sign that we would recognize, only a long pole, a stake, thrust out above the door with a bush of greenery tied to its end. That stake is the signal that fresh ale is ready within. And here is something that surprises many people. The drink of medieval England was not beer, but ale, and they are not the same thing. Beer is brewed with hops, which give it its bite and, more importantly, help it keep. But ale had no hops at all. It would not keep more than a few days before it soured, and so it had to be brewed fresh, constantly, in small batches, in ordinary homes. And the brewing of it, in these years, was women's work. Across the whole of England, it was the alewives, the brewsters, who made the nation's ale in their own kitchens and hung out the stake above the door when a new batch was ready to sell. The warm murmur of the last few drinkers drifts out into the lane, and then the shutter is drawn, and the lane goes dark and quiet. There is no hurry. We have all night. Now, from the deep shadows by the town gate, comes the soft tread of footsteps and the swing of a horn lantern throwing its little pool of light across the cobbles. This is the watch, the men whose task it is to guard the sleeping town through the dark. There were no policemen in this world, not for centuries yet. Instead, the men of the town took it in turns, night after night, to keep what was called the watch and ward. A great law, set down in the year 1285, laid out how it should be done. The town gates were to be shut from sunset to sunrise, and a watch of men was to walk the streets through the dark nights of the year, and to stop any stranger abroad after dark, and hold him until morning. So the watchman makes his slow round, his lantern swinging, his breath clouding in the cold. He tries a door, finds it sound, moves on. All is quiet. All is well. The town is sleeping, and he is awake, so that it may sleep in peace. Let us step now through a low doorway into one of the small timber houses along the street, where a family is making ready for bed. Inside, it is dim and warm and close. The floor is of beaten earth, strewn with fresh rushes. The walls are of wattle and daub, a woven lattice of hazel branches packed with clay and straw, then whitewashed. In the center, the hearth fire has been banked down for the night, just as the curfew bell asked, a soft red glow of embers beneath gray ash, breathing out a gentle warmth into the room. And see how they light these last few minutes before bed. Not with candles, for a good candle of clean beeswax was a luxury far beyond an ordinary family, kept for churches and for the rich. Even tallow candles of rendered animal fat cost more than many could spare. Instead, the poor of England lit their homes with something almost free, the rushlight. A simple rush gathered from the wet ground, peeled down to its soft white pith, dried, and then drawn through a little melted kitchen fat left over from cooking. Set to burn at an angle in a small iron clip, it gave a soft, low, golden flame. We know, from a man who carefully measured it long after, that a rushlight of some 2.5 feet would burn for very nearly an hour, about a finger's width every few minutes, a small and patient light slowly going down. By the glow of such a light, the family says its prayers and banks the fire and lies down to sleep. And now we come to something truly remarkable about the nights of long ago, something you have, perhaps, never been told. The people of this town are not going to sleep straight through until morning, as we try to. They are going to sleep twice. For this was the way of it all across the old world, before bright lamps and busy late nights changed us. People went to bed not long after dark, and fell into what they simply called their first sleep. They would sleep deeply for a few hours, and then, quite naturally, with no alarm and no worry, they would drift awake again around the middle of the night into a quiet, peaceful waking hour. And then, a little later, they would sink down once more into their second sleep until the dawn. We know this not from one or two old tales, but from hundreds upon hundreds of mentions, in diaries and letters, and old medical books and prayers and poems, that speak of the first sleep and the second sleep as the most ordinary things in the world, the way we might speak of breakfast. So let the family sink, now, into that first sleep. The rushlight is pinched out. The house goes dark, but for the red breath of the embers. And all down the street, behind every shuttered window, the people of the town are letting go of the day and falling, gently, into the first sleep of the night. While the town sleeps, let us walk a little way beyond its edge, to where a low cluster of stone buildings stands dark against the stars. This is the monastery, and here, alone in all the sleeping land, there are men who rise in the deepest part of the night, on purpose, to pray. The monks live their whole lives by the slow ringing of bells, 8 times across the day and night, each marking an hour of prayer with names worn smooth by long use. Lauds at dawn, vespers at dusk, compline before bed. But the strangest and the oldest of these is the night office, which they keep in the small hours, around 2 in the morning, when the rest of the world is deep asleep. A bell rings softly in the cold dormitory. The monks rise in the dark and file down a worn stone stair and gather in the candlelit church to sing into the silence of the night. And then, their long night office done, they return to their beds for a little more sleep before the dawn. Near the church stands the room where, by day, the great work of this place is done, the scriptorium, where the monks copy out their books by hand. For in a world with no printing of any kind, every single book must be written out, letter by letter, by a patient hand. To copy out one large book might take half a year of work, a whole Bible, a year or more. And the beauty they made was extraordinary. The most precious of their colors, a deep and glowing blue called ultramarine, was ground from a stone called lapis lazuli, carried thousands of miles by land and sea, all the way from the mountains of distant Afghanistan, and it was, weight for weight, as costly as gold itself, save for the robe of the Virgin alone. A single great Bible might use the skins of some 500 animals for its pages. The room is dark and still now, the desks empty, the half-finished pages laid carefully away from any flame. But by day, here, in patient silence, ordinary men made things of such beauty that we still catch our breath at them, 800 years on. If you are still with me, there is no need to hold on tightly. The night will carry both of us from here. For now, across the sleeping town, the first sleep is ending. Here and there, people are drifting awake into that quiet hour in the middle of the night, the waking time between the two sleeps. And it was not a thing to fear or to fret over the way we fret now when we wake in the dark. It was simply a part of the night, and people had gentle, easy uses for it. Some lay quietly and talked with the one beside them in the soft dark. Some rose to tend the fire or to check on a child or a beast. Some thought back over the dreams of their first sleep, which were believed to mean a great deal. And many, in this God-fearing age, simply lay still and prayed. There were even prayer books written for this very hour, for the things to think on while you lay awake between your sleeps. Imagine that. A whole quiet world, awake together in the dark, in the middle of the night, and perfectly at peace with it. And if any of them rose and stepped to the door and looked up, they would have seen a sky that almost none of us will ever see now. For there was no other light, no street lamps, no glow on the horizon from distant cities, nothing at all but the moon and the stars. And so the heavens above this little town blazed with more stars than you can well imagine, some 2,000 or more, visible to the naked eye, and the whole great pale river of the Milky Way pouring clear across the dark from one side of the sky to the other. It is a sky we have very nearly lost. Today, most of us live where its faint glow can no longer be seen at all. But every soul in this sleeping town knew it by heart. It was simply the roof of the world. The same stars wheeling slowly over every single night of their lives. It was not all peace, of course, the medieval night. These were people who feared the dark in their own ways, as every age has. They believed the night air itself could carry sickness, a foulness that rose with the dark and the damp, against which the wise shuttered their windows tight. And out in the marshes and the fields, they told of strange pale lights that flickered and drifted just above the ground, and seemed to beckon a traveler off the safe path and into the bog. The will-o'-the-wisp, they called it, the foolish fire, among a dozen older names. We know now it is only marsh gas, faintly glowing. But on a dark night, far from home, with no light but the moon, it is easy to understand how a wandering light in the dark might set the heart racing. And yet, shuttered safe indoors, with the fire banked and the door barred, none of that could reach them. The fears stayed outside, in the dark, where they belonged. The waking hour passes, gently. One by one, those who have stirred grow heavy again and pull up the blankets and let themselves down into the second sleep, the long, deep sleep that carries them on to the morning. The watchman's lantern moves, far off, and is still. The embers settle on 100 hearths. The monks are back in their beds. And the great bell in the church tower marks the slow hours over the rooftops to no one but the stars. 700 years and more have passed since this night, the one we have been walking through together. The little timber houses are long gone. The church, perhaps, still stands. The names of the alewife and the watchman and the family asleep by their banked fire were never written down and are lost. We are very quick now to call their whole age a dark one, but they were not the fools we sometimes imagine. Their scholars knew well that the world was round. Those who lived past the dangers of childhood often saw their 50s and 60s and beyond. They built cathedrals that still stand and made books of heartbreaking beauty and worked out a gentle, sensible way to pass the long nights, 2 sleeps and a peaceful waking hour between, which some now think may suit us far better than the way we sleep today. And the night still comes to that town, wherever it lies beneath the modern world, just as gently as it came then. The people of the town are deep in their second sleep now, the watchman leaning by the gate, the monks returned to their cells, the family by the red glow of the banked fire, the rushlight long since out. They do not know that we came to visit. They are only sleeping, as the whole world sleeps, as you, perhaps, are sleeping now. So let go of the last of it, whatever you are still holding. The fire is covered, the gates are shut, the watch is keeping. There is nothing left to do, and there never was, only to let the first sleep take you, gently, the way it has taken sleepers for 1,000 years, down into the warm and the dark, with the second sleep in the dawn, waiting quietly on the far side of the night. Sleep well, and when you are ready to travel again, Nox Historia will be waiting. Good night.